Senator Bacik.
I'd like to welcome the Minister to the House and welcome the opportunity to resume our debate on the bill and on the committee stage amendments, and to say that I hope that we can look to see whether it would be possible to put in more reference to the best interests of the child as a primary consideration. I'm conscious that that is already provided for in a number of sections in the bill, and I'm conscious that we already have it clearly set out in section 24 dealing with the examination to determine the age of the unaccompanied minors, section 35 dealing with applicants who are unaccompanied minors, and section 57 dealing with the situation of vulnerable persons. So I'm conscious that is already, that phrase, that important phrase, is already specifically spelt out in some provisions of the bill. And of course, all senators will be aware of the constitutional provision on the rights of the child to which all legislation is subject. So I think that has to be said. But I do support in principle Senator Van Turnout's attempt to ensure that that consideration that is adhered to or is emphasised throughout the bill. And I think if we can look at some way to do that, and I'm conscious that the bill is still to go through all stages in the Dáil, so there may be time to look at whether it would be useful or effective to place further specific reference to that consideration in other provisions of the bill. As I say, there are 3 provisions in which it's already specifically outlined, and the 3 provisions most relevant perhaps. And I would just say that I also welcome the Senator Van Turnout and the other senators who've put down amendments, the fact that they're engaging so constructively to ensure that the bill is improved upon, and I think that's really welcome. And just to say that last week I was one of the senators who said there'd been a broad welcome in principle for the bill from NGOs. I stand over that. I'm looking at NASC's comment last week. I have the document in my hand. NASC welcomes the introduction of the International Protection Bill 2015, and we welcome the fact that the bill relates solely to protection. I'm looking at the Irish Refugee Council note on the bill from 30th November. The Irish Refugee Council supports the introduction of new legislation in this field, given previous attempts to legislate dating back almost 10 years, and agrees that a new application procedure is needed as soon as possible. Let's not have posturing on this. This is the first attempt to raise a baseline in a very flawed and problematic process. In 10 years, clearly a lot more needs to be done. Clearly there's a great deal more to be done in terms of the working group, even just in terms of the working group recommendations and direct provision. But direct provision is only one part of our immigration legal framework, our immigration law legal framework, which, as I said, needs a great deal more reform. But let's be conscious that in the 5 years or 4 years of the previous government, they made tortuous attempts to bring forward an overarching immigration, residence and protection bill and failed to do so. This bill is only a small part of that, dealing, just as we all know, with international protection. I already said that last week. It will greatly improve things for those who are seeking asylum in future by providing for single unified procedure, and it will greatly improve things for those in direct provision by ensuring that people won't be languishing for long periods of time. And all of us across the party basis have spoken on the need to reform direct provision to end it in its current incarnation, where delay is the biggest problem. I'm looking at that recommendation of the working group, the early enactment and implementation of a single procedure by way of the International Protection Bill as a matter of urgency. That deals with one of the biggest issues in terms of direct provision, which is delay and long periods of time and children growing up knowing nothing but direct provision, as Senator O'Flaherty said. So, let's agree on that. But I can't understand how any NGO can suggest that this bill doesn't represent an improvement on the current procedure. A lot more to be done. Let's engage constructively to improve the provisions of the bill. I've spoken very openly in this House already about the unfortunate speed with which we're getting through the bill, the fact that there are so many government amendments so soon after publication, albeit that most of them are not substantive in terms of changing name and being relatively technical. But nonetheless, it's not ideal, clearly. And yet it does represent a huge improvement. It is long overdue, long overdue, and I believe that it is most unfortunate that we're seeing people now calling it to be withdrawn, or even running a gauntlet outside the House. Kill the bill? When are we going to see it back in? Let's be frank and honest. We know that we have very limited legislative time left in the lifetime of this government. Let's try and get this bill through, improve it as it's going through, engage constructively on it, and engage constructively with government on seeking to bring about the other recommendations of the working group in terms of direct provision, and indeed working for a future overarching immigration law reform we so badly need. But this is a first step, and it's a very welcome one, and it's long overdue.
Thank you, Senator.